Hello, everyone. I'm Roman Polnar, and on behalf of Hebrew Free Loans Business Circle, I am delighted to welcome you to Food for Thought, which is a series of conversations with business leaders, entrepreneurs, professionals, passion driven philanthropists, and thought leaders in our community who offer to share their insights. And today I am especially excited to have a conversation with a special individual and our Business Circle member, Eric Benhamou. Now, it's hard for me to really wrap my mind and my arms around the best way to introduce Eric because of the many dimensions that make him and his life's work so unique, but I will do my best. Because on the highest level, I'd say that Eric is deeply committed to building a better world. And he pursues this commitment through his work at Benhamou Global Ventures, a global venture capital firm supporting the most promising entrepreneurs around the world, as well as through his many passions, among them entrepreneurship, technology, innovation, Israel, and giving back. And prior to founding Benhamou Global Ventures and the Israeli Venture Network, Eric's professional career in the IT industry spanned 40 years and included serving as CEO of 3Com, CEO of Palm Computing, makers of the Palm Pilot, for those of you that remember, as well as many other top leadership roles through which he participated in 7 IPOs and 36 mergers and acquisitions. So I will certainly be asking Eric to share some of his professional insights as CEO of these large enterprises, as well as his venture capitalist views on supporting rising entrepreneurs and his personal journey that I think you will find both interesting as well as motivational. And just before welcoming Eric, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Hebrew Free Loan of San Francisco, for supporting our Northern California Jewish community for over 124 years. And this series of conversations is another way to offer resources and support, because each person that we're speaking with is a business leader with real-world experience who have volunteered to share their insights that may help you navigate whatever challenges or opportunities you may be facing in your own life or in business. And so, without further ado, Eric, welcome to Food for Thought. Thank you so very much for being here.
Thanks, Roman. It's great to be here.
So, Eric, there's so many places that we could start, and I have a lot of questions that I know our listeners would love to have you talk about. But you asked me to mention 3 specific words in your introduction, and so I think we should start there. So tell me, why did you choose technology, entrepreneur, and immigrant as those 3 important words?
Indeed, it's a great place to start. These 3 words really defined a lot of my trajectory as not only a professional, but also as a human being. So I deeply believe that immigrants have something a bit special in their experience that influences how they behave, how they think, how they approach the world. And they basically try harder. They go through the ordeal of leaving a lot of where they were born behind, and their environment, their ecosystem, their relationships, and they have to restart somewhere else. And making this mental shift prepares you better for the challenges ahead that inevitably come your way if you want to build something. So I have a bias towards immigrant entrepreneurs. I think they will try harder. They have a chip on their shoulder. And in fact, the numbers are there to prove this. Immigrant entrepreneurs have been immensely successful, disproportionate to the numbers. And you find them not just at the head of startups, but at the head of the most prominent technology companies in the world. So that's why I have this bias as an individual, but also my entire firm wants to invest in cross-border companies, basically companies born thousands of miles away from here in Silicon Valley, led by entrepreneurs who decided that transplanting themselves and their family was worth the sacrifice in order to build a more ambitious business.
Well, I'm curious how much of your kind of worldview and these discoveries that you'd made along the way were shaped by your own personal experience.
It certainly was. This was not by choice. I was born in a small village in North Africa, in Algeria, to be precise. And this was purely circumstances. I could have been born just 20 miles west and or been born on the Moroccan side, which would have influenced my destiny. The Sephardic Jews who were born in Algeria were given French citizenship, which was a great advantage during the Independence War, because at least we had one place we could go, since we were all practically expelled from this place where we had probably lived for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Moroccan Jews were not as fortunate because they were not French citizens, so they had to either go to Israel, go to Canada, if you made it to the US. But for me, it's my passage to the US had to stop over about 15 years in France, from the age of 5 to the age of 20. And after that, I came to the US to stay to this day. Went to Stanford, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I've not lived further away than just 5 miles from Stanford ever since 1976. So that was my trajectory. And so I qualified as an immigrant. I had to transplant myself at the age of 5, and then again at the age of 20. So it's kind of a double experience. And this prepared me well for being an entrepreneur.
So maybe you can take us through that journey a little bit, because I know that you reached the peak of your professional accomplishments and career as a leader of global enterprises, and you now support entrepreneurs around the world. But I'm sure it wasn't always like that. So what would you share with us as kind of the most important mile markers in your life that got you from, let's say, Stanford, or if you wanted to start even sooner, whatever you think would help, our listeners get a better sense and better value out of, the worldview that you've shaped for yourself and what you're looking to accomplish. So, what was your journey like?
Well, I was born in 1955, which makes me almost 67 today. And the reason I start there is because people who were born in that year have a special privilege. They were born in the year that graduated 18 to 20 years later, which was the very, very beginning of when computer science and networking was taught in engineering schools. And this is the same luck that people like Bill Gates, Eric Schmidt, and many others, Steve Jobs, of course, share. We were the first cohort of people who were exposed to advanced computer technology. Had we been born just 4 or 5 years earlier, we would have missed all this, and I'm sure we would have had a very different career. So this set me up in the right way, and I'm not the one that discovered this factoid. Malcolm Gladwell wrote an entire book about this, and he made that point, and I think it has borne out based on my experience. So I was the first in my generation to be able to get into computers in grad school, even before grad school, and this gave me a taste for for the potential of information technology. Also, coming to Stanford in 1975-76 was an immense privilege, because this was the very, very beginning of the ARPANET, which eventually became the internet. And it was just 2 miles north of Xerox PARC, Palo Alto Research Center, which pioneered a lot of the technologies that we take for granted in our office today, like the Ethernet network, and laser printers, bitmap displays, the mouse, all of these things. It was already right there in prototype form at Xerox PARC. So you had basically a glimpse of the future by being so close to it. And I had a chance to visit it when I was about 2021. And this set my career down this path. And this is why I didn't even finish my PhD at Stanford. I joined what was then a startup, a company called Zilog, one of the very first microprocessor-based companies that kind of came out of Intel. And I worked for the inventor of the microprocessor, a man named Federico Fujin, who has patents on these seminal inventions. And there, I ended up working on putting these microprocessors to work in a networking environments. And this is what I started to do as a young engineer. Eventually, I was part of the founding team of one of the very first networking companies called Bridge, which ended up merging with 3Com in 1987. And the board put me at the helm of 3Com, and this set the trajectory of the segment of my career as a CEO, which is a very different experience than as an engineer. So I learned the lessons of leadership in that role. I was quite young at the time. So I'm sure that I made a lot of naive mistakes, but by and large, it was a very successful and rewarding journey, not just for me, but for our investors and the tens of thousands of employees who worked for the company. Palm was a very interesting excursion on the side because we were convinced that information was going to reach the palm of our hands. And when we came across this budding little startup, we felt it was going to go places. It had figured out things that Apple had completely missed with the Newton. They developed a device which had the right user interface, user experience, size, battery consumption, graffiti. It had a whole bunch of things which made it stick. And this was the first truly successful organizer on a broad scale. And just a few years later, we added telephony to this and built the first smartphone. And this was a unique experience that took me into a different part of the industry, but I'm just so happy that I had a chance to enjoy that. And I worked with brilliant people there, including the founders of Palm and many other people who helped build the business. So this was my professional trajectory. And at some point, I reached a stage where after 15 years, extremely intense work as CEO, where I was living and dreaming my company, my investors, my products, I decided that I should move to a different phase, and my family encouraged me to do that. And in 2004, I basically became chairman of these two companies, 3Com and Palm, and turned the rein over to a CEO. And it was his turn to live and dream the company, and me, I could take a seat back and provide coaching and oversight and help make the board an asset. And this was a completely different experience, but it left me free to do something more with my time. So I started to invest as an angel investor. And that's what I did for several years. And it was kind of a lonely job after having run a multi-billion-dollar business with tens of thousands of people. I was just by myself as my assistant. And completely different experience, but it gave me a chance to reconnect with the young entrepreneurs who are of the next generation, who are building the next companies and riding the next technological waves. I took a liking to this, and I felt that I could be reasonably good at this. And I decided to, a few years later, professionalize this activity and turn this into classical venture firm. We're still calling it Benhamou Global Ventures, although now we're shortening this to BGV because it kind of rolls off your tongue more easily. But we now have a full team of investors who work with me and build a portfolio of startup investments. And we invest in these companies quite early. Sometimes we help to incubate them, but then we stay with them all the way to an exit. Sometimes it's an IPO, sometimes it's a trade sale. But we try to contribute all the things that we learned about building businesses, and all the mistakes that we made, we want to make sure that these entrepreneurs don't make the same. They'll make others, but at least they won't make the same as what we did. That's extremely satisfying just to see how these young entrepreneurs are just soaking knowledge and building a business with complete passion. And that keeps my work extremely interesting, and I love it. Along the way, it also created a bit of space and time on my schedule to engage more readily in philanthropic activities. So all the capital that I had built as a CEO, I try to put to work in philanthropic activities. This is what gave rise to IVN, the Israel Venture Network, that I started with many of the people I had done business with in the past in Israel. Many of these people had the same background as me from a technological standpoint. They lived in a different place, but frankly, we spoke the same language. And we felt it was incumbent upon us, since we'd been so lucky to be part of this generation, to do something to improve society. And IVN was born as a result of this thinking and continues to live today. So the Israel Venture Network is focused on basically social investments, impact investments. We made these investments initially on a one-off basis, one project after the other. And after that, since we understood how to run funds, we actually pulled this together into impact investment funds, which is what we've been doing for the last 10 years. Some of these funds we did completely on our own, and others we did in partnership with the government of Israel, that is. And has been immensely rewarding, because these impact funds have truly had an impact. They've changed the lives of tens of thousands of people in Israel who would have otherwise been completely disenfranchised on the fringe of society, whether they are mentally handicapped people, physically handicapped people, Bedouins, Arab women, ultra-Orthodox increasingly. This is one of the biggest social problems in the Israeli societal structure. So all of these investments, I think, have made a difference and have taken advantage of what we learned as business entrepreneurs.
Eric, thank you for giving us that walkthrough. And, just listening to you, it's such a humbling, or a very humble way in which you kind of go about going over your life and attributing some of the fortunes to luck, or just, being born in a certain place, being born at a certain time, and having been given these opportunities. But I'm sure it wasn't just luck. I'm sure it was a lot of hard work, and some of the mistakes that you had mentioned that you might have made personally that you wish rising entrepreneurs would avoid. And, in my mind, I almost see three big parts of your life that you just went over. And I would love to ask you to share with us some of the ways that you overcame and the biggest challenges that you faced, perhaps as a leader of a multi-billion global enterprise. And then also, as you transition to your venture work, what are some of the success markers that you look for in the entrepreneurs that you're now supporting? And then if we look at your philanthropic work, how do you decide which organizations to support or which efforts to pursue? So I know this is a lot, and we don't have a great deal of time together, but I do really appreciate the time that you are giving us. So take your pick, all three, one of the three, whichever you prefer.
Well, it's you're right to segment this trajectory into these buckets, because they were distinct in terms of certainly how I lived through them. And I do think that the challenges that you face as a CEO are quite unique, because there's no way to succeed unless you're totally dedicated to the task. This is not one of these jobs that you can do part-time. I'm mystified by the fact that a few CEOs, prominent ones, have tried to be CEOs of multiple companies. That maybe they can do it. I certainly couldn't do it. Most people cannot do it. You have to live and breathe what you do. And what I found most difficult is that you have to be passionate and dispassionate at the same time. So you have to be able to keep these two mental states together and know how to turn on one aspect or the other, depending on the circumstances. You have to be passionate to justify the toil, the long hours, and so on. And you have to also be dispassionate in terms of understanding your fiduciary responsibilities as a CEO. You have to do right by your shareholders. And sometimes you have to make very tough decisions. The ones which come to mind are shutting down a division or laying off people, and sometimes shattering their dreams. And you have to do this in the name of the greater good of the corporation and all of its constituents. So learning how to turn these mental switches on and off is challenging. And it took me a long time to master this. I don't think I never quite got there, but I was getting better at this. And in fact, today, as I'm sure that your listeners and yourself have seen, we're rethinking the definition of a corporation. It's not just there to serve shareholders. We realize that there are other stakeholders that have to be given full attention. So there is. This was to me the biggest challenge. There is the different kind of challenges as an investor that you face, which has to do with a broader version of the first one, which is decision hygiene. You have to be able to make really good decisions and be as much as possible free from bias, free from the availability bias, for example. Just because you meet 5 companies in this space does not mean that this is the best space available. You have to be able to count on your partners to keep you honest. If you're part of the venture firm and you're passionate about funding this entrepreneur, somebody in your firm has to say, this is all the things can go wrong if you do this. This is why this business will fail. And you better have good answers to overcome these objections. So being able to have these I guess, decision hygiene devices to help improve the quality of your investments is challenging, because we're all human beings. And even if we theoretically understand how our mind can go wrong, it doesn't mean that we have the answers and can control it. So this is what we work hard to improve on as a firm. Sometimes we put good money after bad when it's pretty clear that the company is going to have a rough go in the next several years. It's not clear that you should put more money behind it, particularly when you have other companies who are doing extremely well and who could do even better if they had more of your capital. So these sort of things take a long time to master. And as a philanthropist, you have yet another set of challenges, because you're trying to figure out where you can have the greatest impact. And it's not necessarily in the places that move your heart the most. So once again, it's the same general theme that you have to master part of your brain and your passions, your emotions, so on, in order to be able to do the best possible things with your time, your capital, the capital of your donors or your investors. So these are the challenges that I found the hardest to overcome throughout my career across these 3 phases.
Well, that's a great way of capturing all of the questions that I had. And I think a lot of people who are listening or will be listening or watching this are business owners that may be struggling with some of the same obstacles that you just described in their own ventures, no matter how big or small, as well as just individuals who are not necessarily business owners that are trying to make good decisions. And when bias comes into play, or passion and dispassion, I love how you put that in a dichotomy in place and finding a good balance, as well as individuals that support worthwhile causes and organizations. And you're right in that it's really hard to make the decision to support the right ones, whether it's for business, investment, or philanthropically. Um, and given that we are or were brought together and we're here because Hebrew Free Loan brought us together, um, was there a story that made you decide that you wanted to support the agency and the work that it does, and sort of what motivated you to be involved given all of the other options that you might have in front of you?
Well, I like the fact that Hebrew Free Loan has really helped young students, particularly immigrants,
Mm.
to somehow make a go of their lot in the US. We've worked closely with in Israel with a sister organization of Hebrew Free Loan there, and they've been extremely helpful to us. But I've seen how I personally, even though I never benefited personally from a Hebrew Free loan, I have many people close to me who did, and I saw how it made a difference in their trajectory at the crucial moments in their lives. So, so it seems to me that what Hebrew Free Loan stands for is totally aligned with what I deeply believe in. That's why I support it wholeheartedly. As you can tell from the way I speak about this, I have a deep conviction that the world goes around because there are entrepreneurs who create things. And they create value. And it's a very, very tiny percentage of the population we have what it takes to do that and to do this at scale. And the rest of us, 90+%, are there to just share the spoil and ride on their coattails. So I think we have to do anything we can to make sure that these people who have what it takes are given the resources, the support, so financial and human and the rest, to fulfill their potential.
Yeah, and I think that's a very, very important point. And I know you mentioned it before when we spoke earlier that it's not just about a handout, or it's not just about helping someone at a particular time, but it's staying with them to ensure that they continue moving forward. Same as I imagine you do in your venture work, where it's not just the money that helps these individuals and companies grow, but it's really the guidance and this ongoing support that you can provide. And so with just a minute or so left, are there any takeaways that you would want to leave our listeners with in any of these sort of profiles as someone who is perhaps a leader in a business, and maybe there's something that you can leave as a gem for them to think about? Perhaps there's a rising entrepreneur that is either thinking of launching their next venture or is getting ready to, or perhaps they're already off the ground. Anything for them? And lastly, anything for those individuals that are looking for ways to support worthwhile causes and what they should be thinking about?
Yeah. Well, you thought I was a bit humble when I described my trajectory, but I really don't think I was. It's we have this bias. I spoke a lot about biases. We have this bias to attribute anything good that we did, or any success, to our skills or our talents. And if you only took a little bit of time and look at yourself from a distance, you'd realize that so much of it you owe to you owe to luck. I mean, you didn't choose your parents, you didn't choose the place and time of your birth. It's just sheer luck. And so much of it puts you on a more favorable track. Clearly, you work super hard. That's more under your control. And even then, you could argue that the genes that made you a hard worker, you didn't choose. But for the most part, we're all guilty of attributing to talent what really is more the result of luck, happenstance. And I think it's as much as entrepreneurs need to be completely driven, they have to keep this in their mind, so that when they achieve a great deal, when you're in a position of leadership, they have to keep this humility that causes them to be better mentors when the turn comes, and be better philanthropists if they so choose to invest some of the capital into these sort of causes. So to me, this self-honesty, I mean, it's part of knowing yourself, basically, is essential to a full life. I mean, you have to be able to maintain that throughout and never have this get to your head.
That's a wonderful way to close a great conversation. Eric, on behalf of everyone at Hebrew Free Loan and our entire community, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being here and sharing these insights with us. It was a real pleasure.
Thanks, Roman. Pleasure was mine. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.